Star Wars Echoes. The Ghost of Orestes. Part 1. Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano stood on the bridge of the Star Destroyer Vigilant. She was 21 years old, but already wore the silver chains of command from her montrals. Ahsoka had sharp facial markings and steady eyes. She was as cold and precise as the hole beneath her boots. The Vigilant was screaming toward the fringes of the outer rim, to a jagged hunk of rock called Orestes. It was a minor planet in an unimportant system. It served no strategic or military purpose except one: Dunium, the critical resource that formed the backbone of the Republic fleet. Strictly speaking, Orestes was in a neutral system, far beyond the jurisdiction of the Republic. It had brokered a controversial alliance with the Senate for exclusive rights to its minerals. It had been an unpopular move. The locals had accused their leaders of warmongering and profiteering. There had been resistance, sabotage, and lately, rumors of a dark warrior fighting against the Republic invaders. A warrior with a flaming sword. Ahsoka's hand moved instinctively toward the lightsaber at her belt. It had been almost a year since she defeated the dark Jedi assassin, Asajj Ventress, in the bowels of Coruscant's industrial district. She still remembered the hiss of those twin red blades and the hateful cold of Ventress's presence. The Jedi Council had commended her for killing Ventress, elevating her from the rank of Padawan and making her the youngest knight in a generation. Master Kenobi had even attended the knighting ceremony in person. Ventress was gone, but the enemy was nothing if not persistent. This warrior, sent to choke their supply lines, would face Republic justice, one way or another. The boarding ramp hissed open, venting a cloud of hydraulic steam into the thin, biting air of Orestes. Ahsoka descended first, her hands resting casually but purposefully on her belt. Behind her, the rhythmic clack-stomp of 500 first boots echoed against the landing pad. It was a sound that usually brought relief to worlds within the Republic. Here, it brought only silence. The mining settlement was a cluster of durasteel prefabs and rusted silicate extractors huddled against the base of a jagged mountain range. The air tasted of ozone and pulverized stone. As the 501st marched into the main square, the activity of the townsfolk ground to a halt. Miners in grease-stained coveralls paused and stared. They watched the procession with eyes like flint. Ahsoka saw a young boy, no older than 6, standing near a stack of crates. He was staring with wide-eyed curiosity at Captain Rex's painted helmet. She softened her posture, offering a small, practiced smile as she moved toward him. "It's all right," Ahsoka said, reaching out a hand. "We're here to..." Before she could finish, a woman lunged forward, snatching the boy by his arm and disappearing into a nearby hovel. "Friendly neighborhood, Commander," Rex muttered over private comms. His head swiveled from side to side, as if expecting an ambush at any moment. "They're scared, Rex," Ahsoka replied, though her own skin was prickling. "Come on, we should find someone in charge." She spotted an older man sitting on a rusted spool of power cabling. He wore the tattered uniform of a prospector. His face was a map of deep lines and silver stubble. He didn't look up as she approached. He was whetting a vibroblade against a stone, the shing-shing sound rhythmic and defiant. "I'm Commander Tano," Ahsoka said, stopping at a respectful distance. "I'm looking for information regarding the sabotage of the northern refinery. We've heard reports of a warrior, a man with a lightsaber." The old man stopped sharpening. He spat into the dust at Ahsoka's feet and looked up, his eyes milky but sharp. "Al-Atra," he rasped. Ahsoka blinked. The word was guttural, vibrating in a tongue she did not recognize. Behind her, she heard the subtle chirp of Rex's universal translator as it processed the local dialect through his HUD. "Sir, Rex's voice came through Ahsoka's earpiece, sounding confused. The translator is flagging it as an ancient root word. It means spirit or shadow. The man stood up, towering over Ahsoka with the bulk of one who had spent decades in the deep dark. He pointed a calloused finger toward the swirling mists of the high peaks where the sun never quite reached. Ahsoka felt a strange sensation in the pit of her stomach. Al-Atra, the man repeated. No, Rex corrected himself. It's a contextual shift. Al-Atra means ghost. The North Refinery was a skeletal ruin of twisted alloy and cooling slag, looming out of the mountain mist like a picked-over carcass. As Ahsoka stepped over the threshold, the silence was absolute. She'd ordered Rex and the rest of the 501st to oversee the loading of Dunium onto transports bound for the core worlds, Corellia, Kuat, and Hosnian Prime. The fleet was waiting for those supplies, and further delay would be catastrophic for the Republic's war effort. The Republic needed ships, and it needed them now. She began working her way through the wreckage. To her left, a rack of Republic-issued DC-15S blasters had been reduced to scrap. The power cells had been punctured and the firing pins removed. To her right, a row of all-terrain recon transports sat in a neat line. Their legs had been severed at the joints, the heavy durasteel sheared through in single, clean strokes. They looked like fallen giants, rendered useless without a single bolt of plasma being fired in exchange. But it was what wasn't broken that caught Ahsoka's interest. A power generator, a rusted, rattling piece of tech that kept the local lights flickering, sat barely 3 feet from a destroyed Republic uplink station. The uplink was a blackened husk, its circuitry fried by a focused surge. The generator didn't have a scratch on it, not even a smudge of soot. Ahsoka knelt by a collapsed crane that had once been used to move Dunium crates. The support struts had been cut, but the crane had been guided to fall away from worker housing units, landing instead on a stockpile of Republic munitions. "No collateral," she whispered, her voice echoing in the hollow space. Whoever had done this hadn't been blinded by rage. This wasn't a Sith acolyte looking for blood or glory. This was someone performing a cold, mechanical eviction. Their message was written in every piece of sheared metal. The Republic is not welcome here. The air didn't just move, it changed. The heavy, oppressive weight she'd felt earlier in the pit of her stomach suddenly condensed into a single, sharp point behind her. It wasn't the jagged, freezing cold of Ventress or even the towering arrogance of Count Dooku. It was a stillness so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Ahsoka didn't hesitate. She spun, her blade snapping to life in a reverse grip, the hum of her saber finally breaking the silence of the ruined refinery. Out of the shifting mist and the jagged shadows of the ruined walkers, he appeared. A part of the mist that had decided to become whole. He didn't look like a warrior. His clothes were a patchwork of rugged leathers and homespun wool, stained with the dust of a dozen worlds and frayed by the winds of the Outer Rim. His hair was a wild, sun-bleached mane, tied back with a strip of raw hide. He breathed with the slow, deep rhythm of a predator at rest. His hands didn't go to his belt. The hilts of his weapons simply leapt into his palms as if they had been waiting for an invitation. With a twin hiss that countered Ahsoka's weapon, he ignited them. In his right hand, a blade as pure and blue as the waters of Naboo. In his left, a guttering, violent red like the flaming lava fields of Mustafar. He didn't fight like a Jedi. There was no opening stance, no transition between Form 4 and Form 5. He moved with a terrifying, predatory energy. Ahsoka launched an attack, but he was already moving to her flank, his red blade flickering like heat lightning, his blue blade guiding her momentum away. The form she had practiced 1,000 times over disintegrated. He seemed to preempt her every move, shifting from a brutal, heavy offense to a light, untouchable defense with the fluidity of the wind. He was reading her intent before she'd even committed to strike. Clang, hiss, snap. Ahsoka lunged, her reverse grip style usually a puzzle for most opponents. The warrior simply stepped into her guard, his shoulder hitting her chest with the force of a falling tree. She staggered, her breath hitching in the thin air. Ahsoka scrambled, the silicate dust on the floor grinding beneath her boots. She tried to reset, to find the familiar rhythm of the temple sparring mats, but there was no rhythm here. It was like fighting a storm. She swung her weapon in a tight, defensive arc, expecting a heavy overhead strike from his blue blade. Instead, the warrior vanished from her line of sight. He collapsed into a roll that brought him inside her reach. Before she could pivot, the hilt of his red blade caught her across the knuckles. The vibration hummed through her arm like a swarm of angry hornets. Ahsoka snarled, a flash of her youngling spirit breaking through her rigid Jedi training. She ignited the force in her heels, propelling herself into an Ataru flip, a blur of white and blue light designed to overwhelm. Against any other foe, this would have ended it. The warrior didn't even raise his blades. He leaned back just an inch as her blade hissed past his throat, then caught her mid-air with a telepathic shove that felt less like a push and more like the gravity itself had evicted her from the planet. She hit the ground with a sickening thud. Her lightsaber clattered to the floor, its hum dying into a hiss as the safety sensors triggered. The red light of his left blade bathed her face in a crimson glow, highlighting the jagged, chaotic energy of a crystal that had been bled, yet held with a hand that remained perfectly steady. Ahsoka looked up at him, her montrals ringing from the impact. The warrior didn't look triumphant. He looked patient. The waves of fear, anger, and hatred that usually accompanied a crimson blade were absent. This was no Sith. She realized then that her years of drills, the thousands of hours of perfection, had been a rehearsal for a play he wasn't performing. He had dismantled her, not with hate, but with a terrifying, radiant clarity. "Alatra," she managed. The man's eyes, two chips of glacial ice, narrowed. For the first time, the mask of the warrior showed a hairline fracture. There was a flicker of something human behind the blue gaze, a protective, fierce light. "How do you know that word?" "I've been to the village," Ahsoka panted, her back pressed against the cold ground. "I've spoken to the people. They call you Alatra. It means ghost." "You have no idea what it means," he said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. The blades didn't waver, but the air around him grew heavy, charged with an ancient, protective energy. "It is a word of the mountain, born of its people and their faith. It is not a label to be carried in the mouth of an outsider." "I am a Jedi," Ahsoka countered, her voice gaining strength even as she remained pinned under the weight of his presence. "I am here to help." The man let out a short, sharp breath that might have been a laugh if it weren't so bitter. He extinguished his blades in a synchronized snap hiss, plunging the refinery into a sudden, jarring twilight. "If you want to help, then leave," he said, stepping back into the swirling mist. "Take your machines of war, your white-armored servants, and go." "I can't just leave," Ahsoka argued, standing up and brushing the dust from her gear. The war is a fire you carry with you," the stranger interrupted, his silhouette beginning to dissolve into the gray fog. "The people here were safe long before the Republic invaded. They don't need your war. They need to find their own way. If you stay, you're only placing them in danger." He turned his head slightly. "Go back to the sky, Commander. Leave this planet and its people. This will be your only warning."